also know, you need luck in life, because you can do whatever you want, but sometimes you need a break. And I was lucky to work with some of the best coaches in Holland, and Louis van Gaal and Frank Rijkaard and Dick Advocaat, and I think for me personally, most importantly, Gus Hiddink, because he not only taught me a lot about football, but also from a personal point of view and from a management and leadership point of view. Yeah, and then we ended up in Korea, like you just described, and with Russia and with the Dutch national team, and and all we did was just play football. The only thing is that every training session you have a different objective. So you simplify 11 against 11 this way, or you reduce 11 against 11 that way, so that you overload the specific element of that day, but it's always football. And and later after several tournaments and working with several coaches and clubs, etc., I was on a crossroad, and I had to decide: am I going to work yet another tournament and with yet another coach and with yet another team? And I felt that sharing this with everybody, like we're doing today, was at that stage more fulfilling, because you get a lot back from people in different cultures, and that's fantastic. So I decided to develop the World Football Academy, and at least for the time being, and I don't know how long I will do it, but at least for the time being, and that's already almost 7-8 years, I decided to develop the World Football Academy and to share this objective and universal approach with everybody. And that is also why we developed the book Football Theory and the book Youth Football Coaching, and it's all from the same philosophical starting point for those people who want to benefit from that.
Well, let me share this, because this is really interesting. So I've got a great friend that coaches the Chelsea women named Emma Hayes. And all of a sudden, she attended his experts meeting, and she's emailing me and texting me about, oh, Anson, this is the most incredible, collection of information I've ever absorbed. You've got to, come to this thing, and I wanted to go, and all of a sudden I couldn't. It was a year when my wife was really in bad health, so I sent the husband of a former player of mine. I sent John Cohn, who obviously is also a fitness expert. And then I hired Cindy Parlow, his wife, to be an assistant in 2012. We completely went over and started doing his stuff. And of course, all my players were thinking, my gosh, we're not really working as hard as we used to. How can we have any kind of success when at the end of our preseason, we're not exhausted like we usually are, and what's going on here? And there was a lot of skepticism within the team. And this is a year when the U20 national youth team had taken my best players with them. They had taken Crystal Dunn and Kaylee Ohai away, and so we're trying to play a collegiate schedule, without my superstars. And we're not, pounding anyone. We're sort of clunking along a bit, but all of a sudden we started to engage. And then we started to engage, started to win some games, and all of a sudden the players are just in shock about how fresh they feel and how effective they're playing. And then, of course, we were one of the lowest seeds in the history of the NCAA to win the national championship, because we get Crystal Dunn and Kaylee Ohai back, and we just sailed right into a national championship. So, Raymond, talk about your 0 point, and talk about freshness, and talk about how, and I assume there are a lot of college coaches in the room and youth coaches, how this idea can still fit within their structure.
Yeah. To go in a little bit more detail about for example, the principles of periodization, is that traditionally, as you know, in football, or as you say, soccer, but I think you understand that I keep saying football, because in your country you play football and then you have the ball in your hands. Like tomorrow at 5:15. I'm going to watch, actually, because I'm a New England Patriots fan, and in particular Bill Belichick, because if there's one coach who speaks action language, then it's Bill Belichick. But if there's one thing that is typical in the football world, is that there is this gray area, this freedom for coaches to do whatever they want. As long as you win, and if you lose, you blame the referee, and you move on. And in a lot of much more professional worlds, especially in the worlds where it's a matter of life and death, the bar is much higher. Then there are objective references, and you have to take responsibility. People are accountable for that. And in football, like I said before, when you go to congresses, courses, you are educated subjectively. People share their opinion with you. They share their experience with you. They tell you things because they believe in that. But I hope you understand that that is a relatively low level of education. Because why would you copy the subjectivity of somebody else? Because apparently it has worked for him. But if it's subjective, then it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. If you do education, if you are a pilot, or if you are a surgeon, or if you're a Navy SEAL, you are not educated subjectively. You are educated objectively, philosophically, based on facts. And now the question is, and that is a question that everybody in the room and in the football world should ask, in our world, people normally don't die. But why does that mean that we are going to lower our bar? Why don't we keep the bar as high as Navy SEALs, surgeons and pilots? Why don't we demand from ourselves that we educate ourselves objectively and factually and philosophically? Why do we accept from ourselves that we lower the bar because we know we get away with it, because normally nobody dies, you see? And if somebody dies, in relative terms, we lose the game, we can blame the referee. But I promise you, if the pilot crashes, he cannot blame the referee. You see, it's a totally different context. And it is the same when you talk about training. If you go to the practicals here this week, you see all these flavors of the month. Everybody is doing whatever he wants. And if you bring it in a nice way, everybody says, okay, yeah, great session. But it's totally arbitrary, because you see things in practicals that have absolutely nothing to do with football. You look at something, and I'm not criticizing anyone, I'm just describing what I see. Yes, and everybody is responsible for himself or herself. But what I see is that people are doing practical sessions, and then one or more characteristics of the game are missing. That means that you're training a different sport that looks very similar to football. Yes? Okay, and then the question is why? Because people get the freedom to do whatever they want, yes, because there are more ways to success. No, that is at the level of application. That is the how. But above the level of application, above the level of subjectivity, there is the level of philosophy, of objectivity, yes? And for pilots, that is how you fly a Boeing, for example. And that is non-negotiable. And in football, these characteristics are the same for everybody. And to go back to your question, those principles of periodization, those are principles that are a fact. It is undeniable. And one of them, like you said, is fitness and freshness. Or, for example, how you develop fitness during pre-season. And as you know, and maybe as you have experienced in the past yourself as a player, you are coming back from the off-season, pre-season starts, your fitness level is here, and where is the training load? Here. Which Einstein did invent that? Yes? This is what you call subjectivity, or this is what you call tradition, or habits, or rituals. Yeah, but when I was a player, my coach was also training me like that, and I want to be fit, so this is the training load. No, if this is your fitness level, this is your training load, and then you get fitter. And then this is your training load, and then you get fitter. And this is your training load, and then you get fitter. And then you still reach that same level, but instead of that the training load is a constant factor, and that your fitness level is a variable, and you are just doing survival of the fittest. No, what you say is not the training load is a given and you have to adapt. No, the fitness level of your players is a given, and then you adapt the training load to that. And then you do it step by step. First of all, you don't run your players into the ground. They don't accumulate fatigue. That is from a performance point of view as a consequence that their speed of action stays high. Because if you run your players into the ground and they are tired, I hope you understand that you are conditioning your players to play slow football. Unless you want that, you have to ask yourself the question what you're doing. Yes? Freshness, in other words, not being fatigued, is essential, is crucial to play football with maximum speed of actions. So from a performance point of view, this gradual build-up in pre-season is a given. It's a given. It's not a choice. Yes, in our world, in the football world, it's a choice because there is no reference. But if you put your bar high, then a gradual build-up, when the fitness is here, the load is there. It's a given. That's how the body works. If you put the load there, you're gambling with the well-being of your players. Their performance goes down because fatigue means less speed of actions and lower accuracy. Yes? And secondly, not only from a performance point of view, but from an injury point of view, if players are running to the ground, in other words, the time between session is too short to get rid of the fatigue, so you start the next session still more or less tired from the previous session, you start the training session already with fatigue, and if you accumulate fatigue over time, what will happen is that your nervous system will get slower. The signal from your brain to your muscles travels slower. In other words, your coordination goes down. And when you have a lower coordination and you have to make hundreds of maximum explosive actions during the game, I hope you understand that this player is playing Russian roulette with his hamstring, with his ACL, and with a few other parts of his body. In other words, if you don't have this gradual build-up, the injury risk will also go up. And if the injury risk go up, in other words, you suffer injuries in pre-season, how many training sessions and how many games will you play with your strongest 11? Less and less. And what is the consequence of training and playing less frequently with your strongest 11 in pre-season is that your team development slows down. Yes? So I hope you understand that all over the world, for about 100 years, people are doing a subjective approach in pre-season, conditioning slow football. And you've all been there as a player, that you were tired in pre-season and that you were happy that pre-season was over. So you are training slow football, and slow means lower than 100%. You are doing football with less accuracy because of the fatigue, more injuries, and less team development. Like I said, which Einstein did invent this? Well, actually, it wasn't Einstein, because if you zoom out and think about this, then it is impossible that somebody is consciously choosing for this chaos. Yes? So it is not a conscious decision. This is what you call an unconscious habit, ritual, tradition. In other words, conservatism. In other words, we train like we did 30 years ago. And now the question is for everybody individually, what are you? Where do you stand? Do you keep the bar here like everybody else? Or are we together going to raise the bar with these principles of periodization because our players deserve that? And that is something, and nobody can change the world in this room. And I don't think that anyone in this room wants to change the world, but everybody in this room can change himself or herself. And that's the only thing we can do. And we can have these sessions. And then hopefully, within the near future, together we can create a more objective, philosophical football world, and that we can offer our players better training sessions and better opportunities to fulfill their dream.
Let's drill in a bit so they can understand in a more practical sense what we're talking about. So tell them about the 3 different platforms and the cycles, the 11v11, the 7v7, the 4v4, the recovery with each of them and how the cycles work, just to give them a general idea of what the fitness platforms look like with even things like 10 on, 2 off, 10 on, the 11v11 platform to get to a 0 point, and some of the 7v7 things in 4v4, just so they have a framework within their own understanding of the game.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me ask a question. Can you please raise your hand if you are familiar already more or less with football periodization? Can you please raise your hand? Wow, that is encouraging. And I hope you understand that I can adjust my answer to that fact, because then I don't have to go all the way down, because most of you understand, so that's good. Yes, the thing is, for example, if you think about football fitness, and I will talk about that tomorrow in the 1-hour session in more detail, football fitness is a perfect example of everybody doing whatever he wants, yes? Because if you talk about football conditioning, then basically what you are saying is the conditioning of football. Yes, yes or no? Yes? Football conditioning suggests the conditioning of football. And then what you see is that somebody's doing something else. So I'm doing football conditioning, but in fact you are conditioning running, or you are conditioning a muscle, or you are conditioning an energy system, or you are conditioning jumping over a hurdle, or whatever. You see? That is not football conditioning. That is conditioning your body or conditioning whatever. And in football, there are only a few people who are actually thinking about that. They think it's necessary. And the problem is we don't have enough football philosophers. People who think about the game in a very philosophical way. Because look, you are working in a world where people call themselves football conditioning coach, and then they condition running. Do you understand how low that level is? And do you understand that the fact that that is at all possible, so you say I'm a football conditioning coach, and in reality you are conditioning running or jumping or muscles, do you understand that in aviation, in surgery, in the Navy SEALs, that is impossible? That this miscommunication, this wrong definitions, it's impossible. If the pilot communicates like that, then he crashes the plane. Yes? So to go to that periodization model, if you want to develop the fitness of your players, the first question is, what is fitness? Well, fitness means making your actions more frequently in the first half to play a higher tempo and to maintain that tempo for 90 minutes. And then the question is, what exercises are you going to use? Well, if 11 against 11 is the starting point, is the context, and your objective is not VO2 max, because that is not football conditioning, or anaerobic threshold, or aerobic capacity, no. If you want to play the playing style with a higher tempo, it is more actions per minute. So if 11 against 11 is the starting point, and you want to overload your players in terms of more actions per minute, what is then the exercise? That you have to reduce the number of players. Yes, because every coach in this room knows that if you play 11 against 11, for example, you make 3 actions per minute. So that means 20 seconds between actions, on average. If you play 7 against 7, you might make 5 actions per minute on average. That means only 12 seconds between actions. And if you play 4 against 4, you might even make 10 actions, which means on average 6 seconds between actions. In other words, if you reduce the number of players, you are overloading your players more and more and more in terms of actions per minute. Yeah? So that is a significant part of the periodization model. And that is to play a higher tempo in the first half. And then the second part is to maintain that. Well, all you have to do is to play big games, 11 against 11, 10 versus 10, as some of you don't have 11 against 11 available all the time or at all. So you can also do that with 8 against 8 or 7 against 7. All you have to do is keep playing. You keep playing, like you say, with the blocks of 10 minutes, for example, with 2 minutes rest. And if your players are dropping in the second half in the game, in other words, they start to make less actions per minute, they cannot maintain the tempo. If that is the case, then that will also happen in the training as long as you keep playing long enough. And by the way, if the problem in the game is after 70 minutes, you don't have to do it in training for 70 minutes. In training, it will happen much earlier, because in training, you don't have half time, yes? And you don't have substitutions, and because you can play, start play all the time. Yeah, so in training, it's almost net playing time. So you do these relatively big games, you keep playing, and then at some stage, players start to make fewer actions. In other words, there is a transition, one or more players are walking. Or you are building up, but one or more players are hiding between their opponent and they're not available because they want to take a breather. Yes? And then the question is, what are you going to do? Because now you have reproduced the football fitness problem of the game in training, and now the question is, what are you going to do? And what you often see is that coaches make the problem of the player their problem. In other words, they start to shout at players or whatever to force them to keep making actions when they are tired. But in reality, if you coach these players, you have to keep it their problem, and you are only there to help them. Yeah? But if you don't have a reference, and if you don't have clear language, this will be 10 times more difficult. What do I mean? And I'm going to give you a very practical example. And I'm touching a little bit on the football braining concept, the psychological concept that we have developed, which has to do with coaching. Traditionally, people use the dualism of Descartes, body and mind, physical and mental. And there are several people in this room who have been to one or more of my courses, in which I philosophically explain, so not subjectively, but philosophically prove that body and mind is incorrect, that physical and mental is a philosophically incorrect reference. In fact, what the right reference is, from an action theory point of view, is that there is not a body and something else, but there is a body, and this body interacts with your surrounding. I explain it in a nutshell. If you want to know more about this, then that should take place on a different occasion. And to make a big jump, we talk about the brain and we talk about thinking. And this player in the 70th minute, while he's walking during transition, what in reality is happening is that he should join the transition, but he is walking maybe because he's tired or because you're 3-0 down and he gives up. In other words, instead of thinking next action, transition, he is thinking fatigue and he's walking. Or he's thinking 3-0 down and he's standing still. So the reality is that this player makes a thinking mistake. He makes a brain thinking mistake. And then you don't have to shout at the player. No, what you do is you create this reference for your team. You create this reference, this football thinking reference for your players. And then you make the player aware of the fact that he makes a thinking mistake. And then instead of shouting, all you have to do is, and then the player says, oh yeah. So you make him aware of the fact that he is thinking fatigue and walking instead of thinking transition and joining the transition. And if your players are better able to control their thinking, in other words, their brain gets stronger, what do you think will happen with lungs, heart, muscles, red blood cells, etc.? Will get stronger. Yeah? So overloading players is not directly focusing on developing energy systems or muscles or lungs or hearts or whatever physiology. No, overloading football means putting your players in a position that they get an overload on their brain. And then they can choose. Think external factor, either fatigue, the score, the referee, the opponent, the pitch, the weather, whatever. Or think next action. And the player can choose. And the player is responsible for the choice of his thinking. So in other words, if he's thinking fatigue and he will be walking, then next time he will be on the bench. If he is thinking transition and he's joining the transition, next time he will play. Yes? So if this player ends up on the bench, who put him there? The coach or himself? Yeah, he put himself on the bench because he made a thinking mistake. So if the player is complaining about the fact that he's on the bench, then you say, oh, you want to play? Yeah, then you have to make a different thinking choice. Yeah, good luck. So you are helping him, but you don't make his mistake your mistake, or his problem your problem. So, to cut a long story short, periodization model, football fitness, first half, more actions per minute, higher tempo, reduce the number of players. Second half, maintain the playing style for 90 minutes, play big games, keep playing them. At some stage, players will be walking, standing, whatever. Don't shout at them, don't get angry, don't know. With the help of the football braining reference, that we can talk about in detail another time, you can coach them in terms of controlling their thoughts. And these two components are the most crucial elements in the context of your question.
Let me throw this out, Raymond, because this was fascinating. This gets back to when I didn't know who he was, and I'm asking these questions, and all of a sudden he's constructing a rationale for substitution. And this is interesting. Sunil Gulati, who's a good friend of mine and someone I have a lot of respect for, I could sense was being briefed by his national staff coaches about how they want to change the culture of player development in the United States. And he wanted me to lead the way on the women's side. So he came up to me and he said, Anson, I would love for you to initiate on the ACC and the ACC women's side on your own to basically play FIFA rules. And I said, Sunil, I don't think that's the best route for player development. And what I really appreciated about him is his national staff came into the room with me a couple minutes later, and he didn't throw this out to make this a confrontational meeting for me and the rest of the national staff. But I used to certainly coach the national team. I can certainly compete with the FIFA rules. We won a world championship with them. But I've come to feel that right now the best way to develop a player is if you want a kid to sprint for 90 minutes, if they stop sprinting in the game, you take them out. And so the question becomes, how do you do it? If you want a kid to sprint for 90 minutes, do you throw him out when he's unfit and have him survive them 90 minutes? Select, when he's going to make his sprints, when he's not going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or do you play a kid for as long as the kid can sprint, and when they stop sprinting, do you take them out? And obviously that's my philosophy. And I'm throwing these questions at him in the room to basically be consistent with what he's teaching us in his model. And he answered every question to basically tell everyone in the room, if you want to develop an elite player, when they stop sprinting in practice, that's your 0 point. When you stop sprinting in a game, it's also your 0 point. And then also, Raymond, get into the birth month anomaly. I mean, most national teams, if you look at when these kids are born, they're born in January, February, March, or April. And the end of the calendar year, very few of those kids ever make the national team. So an idea in expanding our player pool, certainly in this country, where we have the advantage of substitution, I didn't want our national staff to take that away from us, and obviously that's the direction we're going in, because what's their model? Their model is FIFA, and they're thinking, well, this is the way to get there. So riff on that a bit.
Well, what is nice, if you listen now to the answer of this question, then you can double check what I mean with objective and philosophical. Because when somebody asks a question, in this case Anson, about the substitution rule, it's very tempting to answer that question subjectively. I think this, I believe that, my opinion is this. But the challenge now is to discuss this and answer this in an objective way. So first you have to zoom out and you have to create the right reference. And the right reference in football is FIFA. FIFA is the overall organization in football, and it is their responsibility to create fair play for everybody. Yes? That means that if the international rule is 3 substitutions, then that should also be the case in the USA. Yes? So it is the responsibility of FIFA to make sure that in the USA there is a 3 substitution rule. Yeah? But that is the responsibility of the governing body. That is not the responsibility of the USA, because the USA is responsible for the USA. The FIFA is responsible for everybody. So that is what I mean with objectively keeping things in perspective. What you see now is that if the USA is gonna debate and discuss the 3 substitution rule, and they themselves want to go to the 3 substitution rule, then basically they are taking away a huge advantage. Because for as long as FIFA is not going to change it, you guys have a massive advantage. Why? Because with this substitution rule, you can do 5, I think, or even more.
Yeah, even more.
Oh, you can even more. The advantage of this is that you can play always at 100% tempo for 90 minutes. And if even in the last 20, 30 minutes of the game, the tempo is extremely high, the overload on every single player on the pitch is higher than anywhere in the world. And if the overload, in other words, space, time, speed of actions, number of actions, yes, because now somebody's pressing you who just came from the bench, rather than somebody is pressing you who has been on the pitch for 70 minutes, just like you. Yeah, because if that's the case, then he will press less and less frequently than the guy or girl who just comes from the bench. So in other words, it is a big advantage in terms of overloading your players, and overload is necessary to develop your players. So this is an objective fact. In the last 3 minutes when I was talking, not a single second did my subjective opinion sneak into the answer. It is what it is. What I just said is a fact. It's undeniable. If you have to play against players who are 70 minutes on the pitch, just like you, they will press you less than players who are coming from the bench. It's a fact. And if you are pressed better in the 17th, 18th, and 19th minute, that means that you are overloaded in terms of maintaining the playing style, in maintaining good actions and maintaining many actions in the last part of the game. It's a fact. Secondly, it's also a fact that if you can substitute more, then there will be more players with significant playing minutes. Yes? In Europe, when you only have 3 substitutions, there will be 11, 12, 13 players with a lot of game minutes, and then you will have a big group of players who have significantly less playing minutes. You guys have 15, 16, maybe more, I don't know, players in each team with significant playing minutes, and as a result, you will have a bigger pool, a bigger group of players to pick from. And again, this is an objective fact. Yes? So these 2 things are objective arguments in which you can basically finish this discussion within 5 minutes.
Raymond, let's do this because we're going to have to be thrown out of here in 15 minutes. What I would love is for you guys to start to drill into his mind. So let's go in your directions in the last 15 minutes, because I promise you, whatever question you have, you're going to get a very objective answer. Yes, sir. And speak up, because obviously you don't have a mic.
Sorry, so the question is for you, but hopefully through his perspective. When you were introduced to this information, you had that competitive cauldron that you use a lot
Right.
in North Carolina. So how did you adapt the cauldron to be less focused on maybe physical results, not that it was exclusively that way, but less focused on physical and more on the brain?
For those of you that couldn't hear him, how do I take the cauldron and bring in his braining ideas into it? Well, basically, the only change we made is our preseason. We tried to figure out a way to stay fresh, which we did. We didn't change any of the structures except for his rhythm. Within his rhythm, basically, it's sort of 2 weeks with an 11v11 fitness platform, then 2 weeks with 7v7, and then 2 weeks with 4v4. And so we've always played all those different games. Within the college season, the change we made is we just went 1 week in each of those platforms with an overload in those 3 different groups. Nothing changed in the cauldron. And if you guys have seen the cauldron's, I guess 28 different competitive categories did not change in the transition to doing the Verheijen method. You can just look through all of the stuff we send out and see that. So none of that changed. What did change is basically 2-a-days in the preseason. What also changed is we threw out all of our, I guess, running fitness ideas. 120s, cones, et cetera. We threw that out. And as Raymond was describing earlier, everything was about football actions. And so if we wanted basically tighter football actions, one right after another, obviously the 4v4 environment was the best. And so the only thing that really changed was the platforms of our fitness. And it was through 11v11, 7v7, 4v4. So touch on that for them, how, yeah, 10 on, 2 off, 10 on, but then the following week, 11 on, 2 off, 11 on. And the same thing with the 7v7, 4v4, because we did that right through the season.
Yeah, for example, if you want to overload the ability to maintain the playing style for longer, like I just said, what you do is you play big games and you keep playing until the moment that you see that the players reach their football fitness limit. They reach their ceiling. And then you play maybe for 1 minute longer to make it an overload situation, but that is when you stop. And that's what you call the 0 point. Yes? And then the next week, if you have played 3 times 10 minutes, for example, then next week you play 3 times 11. And next time 3 times 12 or 3 times 13. So gradually, after determining the 0 point, gradually you increase the number of minutes, and then instead of developing fitness in pre-season and maintaining your fitness during the season, you are actually keep developing the fitness during the season, which is something that a lot of people worldwide find very difficult to understand, because they are used to maintaining the fitness during the season, and that is already a challenge. But that is often because the players have been run into the ground in pre-season, and as a result, they struggle to maintain that fitness level during the season. But if you develop fitness more gradually, without exhausting them, they can keep developing their fitness during the season. Like you say, 0 point, blocks of 10 minutes. Once you have identified the 0 point, then from week to week and from month to month, you gradually increase the minutes. The same with 7 against 7. You do shorter blocks, 4 or 5 minutes. Again, you do a 0 point. Where do we stand in preseason? And once you have determined the 0 point of your team, then you start increasing the workload, in this case with 30 seconds, because 7 against 7 is much more intensive than 11 against 11. With 11 against 11, we made 1 minute steps, but with 7 against 7, we made shorter steps because it's more intensive.
Does that make sense?
With 4 against 4.
Raymond, thank you. But let's keep chasing your direction, so, and speak up so the room can hear you.
I saw in your book, the World Football Academy had a brief section about applying the principles of periodization to goalkeeping. Are there scientific studies that chart like impact as a cumulative factor?
My first question, before answering your question, my first question is, why do you start with a scientific study? Why is your question based on the curiosity for a scientific study? Let's analyze the game first. Let's analyze the game first, yes?
Yeah.
And I take you as a, I'm using your, you understand that, eh? Yeah. So don't take this literally. I'm using this for everybody. It's almost like a role play. Because you represent the football world. Because the beauty of your question, for me, is that I can use it to show the way of thinking, especially in this country. Not only in this country, but it's typical also for this country. Scientific studies. And yes, scientific studies eventually become important once you understand the game. You have this reference, you understand the game, and now with scientific studies, I want to figure out the details. But what you see in the football world is that all these people are focusing on scientific studies, scientifically study a sport that they don't understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's use goalkeeper coaching. Well, before I go into detail, just a simple example. How many goalkeepers all around the world are extremely good at intercepting crosses? That when they go to a cross, you already know he is going to get it. How many? A lot? Or is it in most cases that when the goalkeeper goes to the cross and he intercepts it, that he says, phew? Yes or no? I exaggerate a little bit just to explain a principle. Yeah? But you know what the funny thing is? Even at the highest level, the coach is happy in the Champions League when the goalkeeper actually keeps the ball in his hands instead of punching it, dropping it, whatever. Okay. But all these goalkeepers are doing are training crosses during the week, right? No. You know what they're training in reality? Catching balls who accidentally come from the sideline. Because there are no opponents, there are no defenders. So all they are doing is, they don't have to communicate with their surrounding. They don't have to make decisions. All they have to do is wait till the ball is coming, and then they catch the ball. So it's not intercepting crosses, it's catching the ball which is coming from the sideline. And then, after doing that on Wednesday, without communication, without decision, then on Saturday they play the game. And then all of a sudden, when there is a corner kick, the goalkeeper thinks, hey, where are all these guys with a different color shirt coming from? They were not here Wednesday. Go away. You see? I'm trying to ridicule goalkeeper coaching at the highest level. And it's not my opinion. I stick to the facts. Because on the one hand, this is what's happening on Wednesday. And then on Saturday, you see that the goalkeeper coach or the goalkeeper all of a sudden has to communicate with its surrounding. There are defenders, there are opponents. Then, based on all that information, you have to make a decision. But which decision? Should I go in front? Should I go behind? Should I go forward? Should I go sideways? Decision time. But all kind of decisions that have not been trained on Wednesday because there were no opponents. Yeah? Welcome in the football world. Okay, this is one. Secondly, goalkeepers are doing exercises. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Okay, 1 minute rest. Second theory, left, right, yes or no? Diving to the left, diving to the right, as an example. Okay. Tell me what's happening in the game. Tell me what's happening in the game.
It's not predictable like that.
How many actions do goalkeepers make in the game?
Not nearly as many.
Yeah. So why are we training something else which is not happening in the game? Why? You know why? Because goalkeepers want to sweat. Because they also want to have a feel that they are doing something. But you know what the funny thing is? You have quality of actions and you have the quantity of actions for outfield players. You want better actions and you want more actions per minute. For a goalkeeper, you want better actions, right? You want better intercepting crosses, better catching, better passing, better diving. But do you also want to overload a goalkeeper in terms of more actions per minute? Or is that a characteristic that is not part of the goalkeeper performance? No, it's not part of the goalkeeper performance. So we are overloading something that is not a characteristic of the goalkeeper performance. Why is everybody doing it? Because they don't even take the effort to analyze the goalkeeper performance. Yes, for a football player, outfield player, you want better actions. You want more actions per minute. You want to maintain good actions. And you want to maintain many actions. 4 characteristics. With a goalkeeper, you want better actions. More actions? No. You want to maintain good actions? Yes. You want to maintain many actions per minute? No. So the goalkeeper only has 2 characteristics in the goalkeeper performance. The quality and the ability to maintain the quality. Yeah, listen, I can't make it more simple to you than this. And it is a perfect example. It is a perfect example of the world that we work in, a world with a bar this low. A world without people who take the time to analyze the fundamental characteristics of the game. No, we just do whatever we want. And as long as we win, we get away with it. Yeah, and if we lose, who are we blaming? The referee. Yeah.
10 minutes left. Yes, sir.
Well, when you're playing a game, so say 2 times 10-minute games, and something occurs during that time in which you think you should make a coaching point. Obviously, you have the rest in between the 2 games where everything stopped and you could kind of make your coaching point. How best can you get your coaching points across without stopping that session? Because obviously, then it would be more than one stop in between those 2 games.
Come to the pitch tomorrow around 1 o'clock or something, or 12:30. I'm going to do a practical, and I'm going to not tell this, but I'm going to show this. And basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a football conditioning session by coaching tactics. That's what I'm going to do. So instead of shouting to the players, run, don't stand still, hey, keep moving because this is overload or this is supposed to be overload, what I'm going to do is I'm going to coach tactics, and as a result, these players will run much harder and much more than when I would throw a ball in the middle. And then they can pace themselves because they don't have a playing position, there is no offside, they don't have a direct opponent, they don't have a specific role. So if they are tired, they walk and nobody sees it because everybody is following the ball in the, because it's pinball. When you throw a ball in the middle, it's pinball. Because within a minute, it's 1 against 1 on the whole pitch, which hardly happens in football, especially in build-up. So to answer your question, I'm going to show that tomorrow. In a nutshell, you coach while they play. If you do not manage to change and influence it during play, during the break, you can use the break to emphasize on that in a static situation, and then you can walk through that situation before you go to the next block. And if you are coaching during the block and something is going not, when there is a tactical problem, for example, or something is going wrong in the exercise, and your intuition is telling you that you can't wait till the next break, stop it. You know why? Because you don't want to maintain the exercise for longer, you want to maintain the playing style for longer. So if you say, oh, this is football conditioning, I can't stop it, it's going wrong, but okay, let's keep playing because otherwise it's not overload, what you are doing is you are conditioning your players to maintain an incorrect playing style for longer. That's not what you want, you see? So tactics is of a higher order than fitness by definition in football, because tactics is here and fitness is maintaining this, and if this is maintaining this, then this is always of a lower order. So again, philosophically it's a fact. And if fitness is of a lower order than tactics and there is a conflict, then you should always choose for that what is of the highest order, and you should compromise that what is of the lowest order. Fitness in this case, despite the fact that it is a conditioning session. Yeah, and do you see how simple now all of a sudden you keep it? Because it's objective and philosophical.
7 minutes, we're doing periodization through Q&A here, so here we go. Yes, sir.
To give you a little bit more of the background, in college soccer, it's very common that players play 2 games per week. So Thursday will be a game, maybe Saturday and Thursday they will play and they will play Sunday again. So Friday, Saturday. We always try to regen the players with some type of non-impact activity in order to help them to recover faster. And that's usually a day after the game. Will you recover them in a tactical emphasis without the low impact activity? What I'm asking is, can you recover a player with soccer actions?
Well, yesterday we had a session of 2 hours with the Division 1 coaches, college coaches. Were you there?
No.
Why not? You couldn't make it? Okay, good. Well, we spoke about it in detail, about this. And it is impossible to answer that question without creating the context first, because when you draw the picture, the context, ultimately you will have choices between principles. Because of this strange situation in college, you cannot create the ideal world. So different principles of periodization will conflict. Yeah? If you apply one principle, you have to compromise the other principle. If you apply the other principle, you cannot apply this principle. For example, game, next day recovery, next day free. Yeah, but if you have the game next day, you see that is a conflict between principles. So yeah, I would need a flip chart here, and I have to create the reference to answer that question objectively, factually, in detail. What I can say in general is yes.
Yes, you can regen with soccer action. Thank you.
The only question is, which soccer actions, and how many soccer actions per minute, and how long does the exercise take? Because if your players are tired because of the game, if they have muscle damage, inflammations because of the game, then this football exercise should not make that problem even bigger. In other words, should increase the fatigue, should increase the inflammation, should increase the muscle damage, should increase the waste products, you see? So this is why you need to draw the picture first to be to answer this in detail.
Back there, here, and then we're done, unfortunately. We got to clear the room. Yes, sir.
Definition of condition. See your comments regarding this definition that I put together. Planned, measured, progressive overload based on the rules of the sport or activity. Comments.
Conditioning means improving.
Progressive overload.
Yeah. So, and it is the conditioning of something, yes? In this case, conditioning of football. So it is improving football. And so the fact, if you want to condition football, it has to take place in a football context. Otherwise, it is not the conditioning of football by definition. And unfortunately, like I said several times in this hour, unfortunately, we work in a world where people say, no, but in my opinion, and then they go in a totally different direction, and then nobody's calling the police. You understand what I mean? Yeah, so, yeah, the pilot has the black box. So if he says, if traffic control says, you have to land the plane on that runway, and he says, yeah, but I have a much better feeling about this runway because the last 10 times I used that runway and every time it went perfect. So yeah, I have a better feeling about that runway. So although traffic control says this runway, I'm going to do that runway because it feels better. Then there is the black box, and then he lands the plane. They come to the cockpit and say, sir, can we please have your pilot license? Yes? And our players deserve a football world in which the bar is also that high. So this is football, take it or leave it. These are the principles. Whatever you think about it, doesn't matter. Take it or leave it. And if the coach doesn't stick to the principles of football, in other words, if the coach is subjectively denying or ignoring the characteristics of the game, we should say, coach, can we please have your coaching license? Because your players deserve better. Yes? But yeah, listen, who is going to do that? Not me. We need the governing body to do that, right? Yeah, exactly.
Just
so
to,
we don't change the world, they have to do that.
Just to set Raymond free after this following question, let me just share this. He's got some fantastic books out. They're written in English. If you get them, the information in there is absolutely extraordinary, and I promise you, a lot of your questions will be answered there. So we'll take this question, and then we'll set everyone free. Yes, sir.
I just want to know your thoughts on this. So in your player development standpoint, you advocate for more substitutions so you can get more players in. That makes sense. But what are you developing for? You're developing for the FIFA rules, then you have them play within those FIFA rules so they're comfortable in that environment, right? It doesn't make sense, at least in my standpoint, to have players that are playing in a certain environment, and if you're expecting to transition them into the FIFA setting, have them not play in that FIFA setting. I just want to know what your opinion is on that.
Let me answer it first, and you can jump in. Let me tell you my philosophy. We have a competition to basically stay on the field. And so one choice that you can make is exactly what you're saying. Have a kid play for 90 minutes, select when and where they're going to take their rest, et cetera, et cetera. I haven't followed that model. I follow a different model. My model is we're going to press for 90 minutes. As soon as the kid stops sprinting within our model, we're going to take them off. And in my experience, forcing a kid to always sprint when they're out there in the field is a faster way to get them to sprint 90 minutes by expanding his time with his methodology than putting him out there for 90 minutes and whipping him somehow to end up sprinting that way. And obviously the reference I use, the number of kids that we've put on the US full team that are playing obviously 90 minutes. They don't play 90 minutes for me, but when they're playing for me, they're at a full sprint the whole time. So the transition for them into the full team is easier because in our context and practice and matches, they're always sprinting. So what I want to throw out for everyone to consider is that might be a faster way to sprint for 90 minutes than what you're considering. Does that make sense? And now I'll just turn it over to the expert.
You have just had a subjective, at the level of application, answer, yes? Do you see that it's not totally clear for you yet? Yes or no? Do you understand that Anson has answered from his perspective, his experience, which is fine. Now you're going to get an objective answer in terms of facts. And now you're literally experiencing the difference. And the only reason why I'm doing this is to help you, yeah? Because this is how you talk to your players. And now ask yourself the question, whether you talk to your players like I'm going to do right now. And what will be the effect in your dressing room and on the pitch? Okay? Okay, we play football for 90 minutes, right? But at some stage, the players cannot maintain the tempo, and the tempo will go down in the last part of the game, whatever, how many minutes exactly, that's not the discussion. Yes, so far so good? I create a reference, okay. Now we have two variables. We can keep the 90 minutes constant, and now the tempo of the game is the variable, yes? So one is constant, the other is a variable. Or we do it the other way around. The tempo of the game is the constant, and now the duration is the variable. Can you follow what I say? So in the first example, the volume was a constant element, the intensity was the variable. So we play 90 minutes and the tempo drops. And now in the second example that I gave is, no, the way that you play football is always 100%. So now the intensity is constant, and now the volume becomes a variable. Yes, so far so good? Okay, so I've created an objective reference. Good? Okay, and now the question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to play football with different intensities, or is the starting point, this is how you play football? In your playing style. What should be the starting point in football? Yes. You have a playing style that is executed in a certain way with a certain tempo. Do you agree that that is your starting point, that is a given?
Yes.
Okay, stop. I just say yes. Yeah? That makes it simple. Because if you say yes, it means that you agree. Okay? Good. So, this is the game model. This is the game model. This is the tempo that we play. And now, what is the variable? The duration. Because what we now want is that eventually, we want them to play that tempo for 90 minutes. Yes or no?
Yes.
Good. So, now the question is, how are you going to approach that?
So, what my main objection...
Stop. Can you please answer the question? Oh, you didn't hear my question. Oh, you were waiting until I was finished talking so that you can talk? No. Okay. So what was my question?
How would I do it?
Yeah. Well, do you see that I use this as a practical? And I do this for you, eh? Because I could have been in my hotel room by now. You understand that, eh? So I'm not doing this for me. I'm helping you. I'm helping you. I am you. He is your player. Yes? It's a role play. So like we said before, I'm using his question to show you the difference between subjectivity and objectivity. So eventually you want to have this playing style for this duration. Yes? What are you going to do? Are you going to do this duration and then say, okay, we play at a lower level? Or are you going to say, no, this is how we play all the time, and over time we're going to do it longer? and eventually 90 minutes. What are you going to do? And I want you to answer objectively. So not based on your opinion, but based on facts.
Same style over the whole duration.
Yeah, that is the goal. But at some stage, in the beginning, you can't do that. In the beginning, you can only do that for 70 minutes. So now, do you allow your players to pace themselves? Or do you say, okay, this is 70 minutes, and next time I want them to do it 71 minutes and 72?
Well, from your reference earlier, it would be 70, 71, 72.
Yeah. And you know what the consequence is, and that is what I said, that is your huge advantage, because what you say in itself is true. You are preparing players for the FIFA rules. So what you say in itself is totally correct. We now are talking how we prepare them for that goal. And the advantage of you, until FIFA says, okay, this is enough, 3 substitutions, until that moment is your advantage that the tempo of the game in the US in the last 20 minutes will be higher. Does that make sense? The tempo of the game in the US is higher in the last 20 minutes of the game. What will be on the long term the effect for players in terms of maintaining this tempo for 90 minutes?
Well, the long-term effect would be they're better in those 20 minutes.
Stop. Thank you.
Round of applause for Raymond Verheijen, ladies and gentlemen. Raymond, good job. Thank you very much. Good job. I've got another session. I've got to fly.